All right, welcome everybody. Let's get meeting number 8 underway. This is the Ad Hoc Committee on Police Policy for the City of Eugene. We're doing this virtually on a Zoom platform to comply with Governor Brown's stay home, save lives order. All right, I want to welcome everyone, committee members tonight. Thank you for your work on this important project. I want to also welcome our elected officials. I see many of the councilors have joined us. I see Mayor Vinnis has joined us, city manager, assistant city manager, city attorney. Welcome everybody, and also to the attendees who are viewing this meeting. I've got a few short opening remarks, and then I will hand the floor over to Mo, who will then hand it over to Councilor Ye. Just to remind everyone, we've got a revised work plan in front of us, which will allow us a deep dive into those top 5 priority items that the committee prioritized way back in October. Now, what that means is that the lower priority items are going to they're going to have to be handled in a different manner. And Kaz, in his presentation later on, agenda item number 3, will touch on that, how we're proposing to move forward with those lower priority items so that they can be included in the report that goes to City Council. I want to just make a quick reminder that after tonight, we have 4 of the ad hoc committee meetings remaining. The next one will be on February 17th. The next one after that on March 2nd, and then on March 17th, and then finally on March 31st. All the meetings will be on Zoom, and all the meetings will start at 6 p.m. Those are my announcements and updates, and with that, Mo, the floor is yours, and you're going to hand it right over to Councilor Ye.
I am, although I'm skipping ahead a little bit, and I see that Silver's got his hand up, so I'm going to let Silver ask his question, and then I'm going to pass the mic to Councilor Ye.
Thank you.
My apologies. I just wanted to say that could we please not call them lower priority?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Councilor Ye?
Thanks, Mo. Well, thank you, everyone. Hello, and I'm sorry to hear. I mean, obviously, we're never going to see each other in person until after this, but I'm sorry that we all didn't get to meet in person at some point during this process. I'm here today a little bit because of what Kevin was talking about how we're not going to be able to talk about all the priorities that were identified by the committee with as much in depth as originally hoped. So we know we threw you guys all into this and you all agreed to do something and a little new, and we're all trying very hard to figure out how to do this best, and maybe we should have been a little more forthcoming with direction. So I'm going to give you guys some feedback, and you are welcome to use it how you will, but I'm hoping that it will be helpful in understanding kind of what council was hoping for and looking for from what we're going to get back from you guys when this is all completed. So the first thing I wanted to share was that you don't need to feel like you need to have ready to implement policy. Like, I wouldn't expect you to spend a ton of time wordsmithing and making sure every word is perfect. What we're really looking for is, with as much detail, the areas where you guys see that changes should be made. And if you have ideas around how that should be changed, that's great. But exact, like perfect wording, if you guys feel like that is holding you back from being able to talk about more things, I would encourage you to not be concerned about that so much, because as you probably know, once we get these recommendations back, many of them will go to different places, the police commission, maybe the HRC, maybe to other groups for discussion, and some of that stuff can be worked out once you guys make your recommendations. The other thing I wanted to make clear is, we want everyone's voices from this committee to be heard in the report and also in this room. And so one of the really important things that they're going to make sure is in the report is dissenting voices. if we got a report back where it was like, all right, here are our recommendations without any, like, well, there were some people that thought this and there were some people that thought that, that would be very disappointing for me. I know that we're not in this, all of the people in this room are not all going to agree. So we want to see that, those different ideas in the report and different perspectives. That's really important. Let's see. And yeah, I guess that was it. I hope that that is helpful, along with those three kind of questions that were sent a little while ago about how to frame the recommendations. And if those aren't helpful at all, or you have other questions, please feel free to email us, any counselor, or you can feel free to email me and I'll be happy to talk to you or just answer a question. It's not a problem at all. I actually hope that you'll reach out to us and let us know how this process is going, because next time we do this, we hope we'll do even better. And since they let me turn my microphone on, I will also take the opportunity to thank Mo, because I see Kaz and Kevin and get to talk to them a lot, but I don't get to talk to you, Mo, very often. And I really appreciate your willingness to be here with us on this, somewhat crazy adventure that we're doing. It would not be this good without you.
Thank you. I see that Ibrahim Koulibaly has his hand up.
Yes, I do. I want to thank Councillor Ye for what she said about hearing all voices, and I'm not going to expand on that. I just want to say thank you for allowing all voices to be heard, because sometimes we may come out as kind of a little rough, but the only thing we have in mind is people who are experiencing rough time the entire life in this town, and we want that to be on display. We want that to at least be heard by each and all of us. And because we are on a Black History Month, and also I was looking for that opportunity to thank Councillor Evans, who is on the call tonight, for being a trailblazer for people like me, for being who he is, and kind of lay the ground for people like me, an immigrant with English as a seventh language, to be here tonight. So I want to acknowledge Councillor Evans tonight, because it's Black History Month. That's my excuse, but also because I think personally that he has been doing for us. He has been laying, the ground for people like myself, my daughter, and all the African American and immigrant coming to this town to be able to stand up and speak for themselves, and also be the voice of the community. So thank you, Councillor Ye. Thanks to all the councillors on the call tonight, and also city manager. I think she's here, Sarah's here, and all the city staff working to make this thing a positive note toward making the community a little bit safer for each and all of us. I'm gonna shut up for the rest of the night. Thank you, and thanks for all you do.
Hey, thanks, Ibrahim. I really appreciate the kind words, man. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm going to pass the mic now to Kaz to talk about the draft report format.
Okay. Well, Councillor Ye managed to hit all of the marks that I was going to hit, or most of them, very much more succinctly than I'm afraid I'm going to, but at least you'll have the opportunity to see much of what was just said written down. So I'm going to share my screen, and so there you go. I'm just going to be very, very quick here. A little bit on the purpose of the committee. It's to come up with policy recommendations, but by no means ones that are perfectly finessed and polished. Of course, we want to get them as far as we can, but we don't expect to see anything that's ready to implement there and then. How we proceeded so far: we created the database, we did the prioritization exercise, we used the subcommittee format, we used motions, and we made a commitment to honoring dissenting voices. And essentially what we're trying to do is to funnel down those 215 or however many it is, policy recommendations, to identify the ones that are most relevant to BIPOC communities and other marginalized communities in Eugene.
Your line forwarded to CRC. You will receive a callback notification when forwarding has completed.
We may have lost somebody there. The glitches that we've seen, the issues that we've had to overcome, there's been concern that some of the recommendations are too broad, and Councillor Ye has spoken to those.
I'm glad you found the glass.
We've heard that some of those might be difficult to implement, given existing policies and laws, that there's no time to consider some of the knock-on effects of some of the proposals that have come forward. The fact that some of the proposals we're just not going to be able to get to, and also this idea that the report will be adopted or not in full. That's not our intent, and I don't believe it's the intent of the councillors either. This is an attempt to look in the round at something that in Eugene we haven't looked at before. Systemic forms of exclusion express themselves in many different institutions in many different ways. And so we've come to you as members of the community with your expertise being your lived experience. Now we're going to move on to some of the solutions that we've talked about. The 3-question format that Councillor Zelenka proposed has been incredibly useful, and I'm sure you saw that in the use of force motions, for example. So thank you, Councillor Zelenka. What that allows us to do is it allows us to see, even if the solution that this committee would like to see cannot be implemented because state law, federal law, whatever other barriers they may be, we still know what it was trying to achieve, what the intent was, and that allows council, the police commission, any other bodies that might need to be involved to move in the right direction, even if we can't necessarily adopt the specific, precise proposal that was put forward. We've also taken the approach that there's no need to have just one single set of proposals on any given issue. We've had a lot of back and forth on things like community oversight. There's absolutely no reason why we couldn't put forward several different models, and then council will have a strong sense of which models have more or less support based on the number of votes that they've garnered and the discussion in the committee. And that again will allow us to move forward. One of the things to bear in mind is we're hitting a moving target at the moment, because there's a lot of police reform stuff that's being pushed at the federal level, that's being pushed at the state level. And so where we end up in 6 months, a year's time, may be very different to the current environment. And again, if we know the intent, we have a sense of what the committee was pushing towards, that gives us a great opportunity to be able to respond to the needs of the community, to the problems they're facing now, the institutional barriers they have now and in the future, rather than the ones that existed 2 years ago. The environment has changed drastically. My next slide, very simply, just an example of the kind of thing we consider will be going forward. So we've taken one of the more straightforward motions and put it into a grid. Our idea here is that the bulk of the report will be these motions and the detail in them. We'll also have an executive summary, and we'd like to give members of this committee opportunity to give a short testimony about their hopes and fears and areas where they think that they'd like to see council concentrate. And then to give you a sense of, so there's a bit more of that there. So there's going to be a lot of grids in this report. But we're intent on making sure that the first part of it, the exec summary and the introduction, are accessible. But we also don't want to compromise on detail, because this is the stuff that will help, say, the police commission to really understand where this committee was aiming, to understand what the potential knock-on effects might be. And here are to entirely sample potential pathways for implementation. So for each motion that's put forward, we'll have people within EPD and within the city look at the kinds of ways that we might get it to move forward. So the simplest pathway, I think, would be this committee to the council, to the police commission, and into EPD policy. And there are a few things, I think, where we will be able to achieve that. Where we have things where there's an issue to do with, say, state law, then it's a much more difficult process, a longer process, a process where we have less control. But that also shouldn't be a reason for us to limit our ambition. We've seen that the state legislature has made changes. It made changes over the course of the summer. And we can help people to, at the state legislature, to understand what our needs are, hopefully the needs of other communities as well. And this is one, it's entirely a sample potential pathway, goes to the AHCP, from that to the council, from there to state representatives, and then it will be up to those state representatives to take it into the legislature and help to work it into something that can be implemented in state law. Obviously, that's a long way in the future and it would take a great deal of work. But like I said, we shouldn't limit our ambition just because we have a relatively small jurisdiction here. And then there's the final issue, which is making sure that we cover, my apologies, make sure that we cover all the ground. And on this, I'd like to get the committee's feedback. And Mo, I will let you deal with the consequences of my actions here in terms of how best to proceed in the time that we have. But we have these 4 areas that need to be covered. There's no way that we could have covered everything. Now, when it comes to prioritizing these areas, we can adopt 1 or 2 approaches, and we'd like to hear from members of the committee either tonight or in emails to get a sense, just to know what it is that you would like us, how it is you'd like us to proceed. There's an active facilitation model where effectively we can put together a survey, more detailed and longer, but similar in style to the one that we did with the prioritization exercise. And that would be to identify some of the biggest elements in each of these key areas that we haven't been able to get to, but are nonetheless very, very important. And you would just say, right, this is something I want the council to discuss, and this is something I want the committee to discuss, or this is something the council should consider. The other alternative is that we would simply go with reactive facilitation. So if you, if members of the committee want to, they can trawl through all of the database items themselves, identify the ones that that are most interesting to them, and put them forward. I will say, just because one of our group agreements is to be aware of power differentials, that I am very aware of the fact that it requires somebody to have the time, the free time, to be able to do that. And so it may be the more exclusionary practice. And I'd just like you to be aware of that when you're thinking about which route you'd like to take. But that said, that's the extent of it from me. There's one other thing that I'd like to announce, which is slightly off topic, but the members may nonetheless be interested in, which is that the Human Rights Commission is currently taking applications. So if you're interested in joining the commission, we have 1 member who's served their 2 terms and will be stepping down, and another 2 members who may or may not apply, so potentially 3 openings on the Human Rights Commission. Please email me or Kevin if you're interested in more details. And with that, I will stop the share and we can all get back to the less tedious elements of this. I apologize for the fact that I've been bringing the administration, but I hope it's making things easier for people.
Thank you, Kaz. I'm actually thoroughly impressed that it's 2 a.m. where you are, and you are so good at explaining all the things. Do you want folks' feedback now, or do you want it via email?
I'll leave that up to you. I think probably email, just because it allows me to quantify more easily. But in essence, you know, if you want active facilitation, I'm very happy to do that. Yeah, maybe email's best, just because it takes the less committee time, unless there are very strong feelings that people want to feedback right now.
Could you send just what, you know, the last couple of slides to folks so that they can just reply only to you, not reply all
Sure.
with their preference? And that'll get, I mean, we're missing, you know, slightly less than half of our folks too. So that'll get to people that aren't here. We're going to jump in. There's a couple of things that I want to say before we jump in. I just want to remind folks to, my favorite way to say this is take space, make space. But if you're someone who you find yourself having something to add to this conversation, often think about making space for folks who have not had an opportunity to speak up. And if you find yourself not sharing your thoughts about whatever it is that we're talking about, consider, you know, taking some space up for yourself and your voice. There's a reason that you're here, and we want to hear from all of you. If that doesn't work for any reason for you, then you can always, you can email us, you can write in the comments, and I will read them out loud. And then I also want to say that at some point I may start limiting how many times people get to speak during a meeting. I'm hoping that that doesn't have to happen because we do a better job at taking and making space. But what I am committed to doing is as I'm writing down who has their hands raised, if there's someone who hasn't spoken yet, I'm going to bump them up to the front of the line. I may ask a clarifying question like, you know, Kaz, do you have something that is relevant to this particular comment? But if the answer is no, then I'm going to bump the person up. Does that make sense? All right. So our first item of actual business is considering recommendations and motions from the Community Oversight Committee. And Daniel had sent revisions to that. So did everyone get a chance to read the revisions? I hope so.
Daniel's got his hand up.
Oh, Daniel.
Yeah, I'd like to move that we refer the remaining items from the Community Oversight Subcommittee to the Investigations and Prosecution Subcommittee. As I said in my testimony from a couple weeks ago, on February 17th, we're going to hear testimony from members of the public specifically relating to their experiences of this process. And also based on the discussion from a couple meetings ago, it seemed that some of these motions required more discussion and more input. And I think that we will end up with a better set of motions if they can be reviewed and discussed through that lens.
I want to second this motion.
Okay. Do we have any discussion?
So essentially, we're passing the work on to the other committee.
Of the remaining motions, yes. Which mostly relate to the investigations of complaints and their adjudication.
I might say that, oh, I didn't raise my hand, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Brian.
I might say that originally when these motions were proposed, one of the awkward stumbling blocks we came upon is that we did motions that should have gone after the more larger motion. And some, you know, well-reasoned objections were, well, if we pass these motions, what if the other motion doesn't pass? And that sort of backward reasoning on our part, which was identified by members of the committee as being backward. This would eliminate that whole awkwardness and would put everything in a correct sequence. I think that's probably the best and least awkward way to move forward.
Okay. I don't see any other hands up. We're gonna vote for the motion that's on the table. Let's see, I don't think Ems is here. Daniel?
Yes.
Is Betsy here? I don't think so. Macy?
Yes.
Ibrahim Koulibaly?
Yes.
Leah?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm like scrolling through who's here. Lindsay?
Yes.
Ib Hamide?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see, Erica?
Yes.
Jason,
Yes.
Justin,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Silver,
No.
Guadalupe,
Yes.
Marvin,
Yes.
Quentin, Quentin, you're muted.
Yes. Sorry about that.
Thank you. No worries. Rick Rosetta,
Yes.
David, you're muted, David.
Oh, I said yes.
Thank you. And Marty.
Yes.
Mo, that's 16 yes and 1 no, so that motion carries.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. So now we're going to consider recommendations and motions from the Use of Force Subcommittee. You all just caught us right up on this agenda, so I appreciate that.
Happy to oblige, Mo.
Just a quick one from me, Mo. I think at the last meeting we agreed that we'd give about 10, maybe 15 minutes to Marty to finish talking through the motions in his presentation. Marty, I'm happy to do what we did last time and share those motions. I know you have some revisions in language. I only have your original presentation, but I will share that. And if you take us to where we were at last time, I think we were on about number 7, then perhaps that might be the best way to proceed if you're happy to do so.
If that's what people want, that's what I'll do.
Okay, let's do it.
All right, what was the next one we were on, Kaz?
Sorry, I'm just trying to get it to come up.
While he's bringing that up, I just wanted to comment on the format of the revision. Basically, I just took the meaning and the intent of what was in the previous motion and put it into straightforward language that is not written as if it were itself a police code or policy. And I'm doing that in response to what the city council had requested. However, I wanted to leave the language in there that was borrowed from existing police policies in other cities, just as an example or a suggestion for whoever uses it to consider. So we got through. Well, I can't remember which ones we did.
Does anyone recall off the top of their heads?
I do have it in writing somewhere else, but I did not prepare that.
Okay.
Yeah,
my
I'm looking
apologies
at
for the
my
clunkiness.
notes, Marty and Kaz, and it looks like we got through use of force -100 duty to intercede. So that was the last one that we discussed.
I think I might have actually pulled up the very slightly older version. I think the content is the same, but it doesn't have your numbering system, which confused me as well. So my apologies for that. So duty to intercede, was that the last one we did?
Yes, I believe that was the last one.
Okay.
Kevin, what followed that one?
Demilitarization.
Yes.
Okay, so for demilitarization,
We had a discussion about this in the subcommittee. The motion reads, discontinue purchases of field equipment, machinery, and weapons designed for war. And part 2, evaluate the equipment and weaponry, currently owned by EPD, and sell or destroy items that should not apply to policing civilian communities. It should include equipment and technology designed for military surveillance and espionage. So I would like to read from the revision on that one. And recognize that this is something that has already been asked of the City Council by different organizations. In stronger language, actually. Okay, so the revised motion is, we recommend that EPD demilitarize their uniforms, weapons, vehicles, and equipment, including surveillance, technology, and equipment. We do not want our local police force to interface with the community as if equipped for war. The policy should include materials designed specifically for police use, but modeled after military equipment. The policy should advocate for the least degree of force necessary to complete the task at hand. And then we offer the wording below. And I did want to share what I shared with the subcommittee, that there's a lot of places across the country that are working on this, and the studies have shown that those police forces that do step back and demilitarize, not only do they see a reduction in the amount of force that civilians show to the police in response, but also that the police themselves, the number of cases of reports or complaints of police brutality goes down. So now I see hands raised.
I'm just gonna grab your newer document and pull that up in just a moment. But in the meantime, please move on to discussion.
I see Marvin's hand up.
Are you actually accusing EPD of espionage? And 2, do you realize that the city government has the ability to accept or reject equipment that had been donated to them by the federal government?
Yeah, the beginning of this actual piece of it started with looking at the 1033 program, which is now discontinued anyway. And Chief Skinner acknowledged that they don't participate in that program. They may have long ago in the past, but that they don't get good stuff that way. They get old, rejected military stuff handed down. But later in the course of the conversation, they said, we just buy our own militarized equipment directly from the vendors. That is, it's branded for police use.
And you're actually accusing, answer my question, you're accusing the EPD and the police of espionage.
I said I wouldn't want them to use equipment that was designed for espionage.
I object to that term in the most strongly senses, in that it is derogatory and inflammatory. To accuse EPD of espionage, it is, and I say that because the last meeting I heard people using the term murder as it related to the district attorney's office, and it is not useful language.
Okay, I have 2 responses to that. One is I'm happy to entertain a friendly amendment to change the wording, as long as it's clear that if the military designs something that they can spy on all our cell phones, I don't want that handed down to the police, and I don't want them to be able to use it. And it doesn't matter to me how you word it. But
then you should direct those comments to the governmental entities who have the ability, who are doing that. It is, the police department is not in a silo of itself to accept espionage or spying on citizens through telephonic means.
So
I
the
think what
other
I'm
part of,
hearing, just one second, Marty. I think what I'm hearing Marty ask for is the words that you could live with, whatever those words are, Marvin.
My
That would
suggestion is
get
you eliminate
to,
that word, that term completely. That's my friendly amendment.
I have another response to that, which is that if an organization is totally not interested in participating in a certain behavior, it seems to me that they wouldn't be opposed to having a policy that says we will not participate in this certain behavior.
You have my friendly amendment. You can accept it or you can deny it, but that term is insulting. As a former police officer, that's an insulting term.
okay.
For 20 years, I was not involved in espionage.
Thank you.
I didn't hear anyone say that EPD is involved in espionage. What I heard Marty say is equipment that could be used for espionage. And then what I heard him ask is there a different word that would get that same feeling across without being offensive? And so if you can think of another word, Marvin, share it or type it or and in the meantime, I'm going to call on Ibrahim Koulibaly, whose hand is up.
Thank you, Mo, and thank you, Marvin. Here's the thing.
Excuse me, sorry to interrupt, Ibrahim. Can you please speak a little louder or closer to your mic? It's hard to hear.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. For the first time in hearing from someone who was involved with law enforcement that espionage is derogatory. That's kind of new to me. And what I want to say is, how is that negative for Mary to refer or to use the espionage or any other term that he used as being negative? How is that?
Mo, should I respond?
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
No more.
I don't believe there are very many people in this organization who knows the oath of office that I and other police officers have taken to uphold the Constitution of the United States of America and the Constitution for the state of Oregon. To use the term espionage implies that we are spies. Now, I do not and have never condoned actions from police agencies and police officers and individuals who do wrong. But those organizations have been protected by the majority community and the majority community government. So I and many other officers, particularly those officers of color, were not spies. We were not involved in espionage in any way. And the equipment we use were not involved in espionage. They were designed to protect and serve our communities. So that's why that term is derogatory to me, because I swore a constitution as an oath of office to protect America, Oregon, and its citizens.
I have a question, Marty. Does surveillance get to what you are looking for?
It may. I'm looking over the wording right now, and I was thinking of proposing a friendly amendment here, including surveillance technology and equipment. Yeah, we can just drop off and espionage at the end. It's still saying the same thing. This should not include technology designed for military surveillance.
Does that work, Marvin?
For the sake of moving on, yes, but I have news for you. When you surveil organized crime members, that's surveillance with court orders, or when you surveil an undercover like I did, that was surveillance, not necessarily military. So just so you know the reality of it, that's what surveillance is. But I can accept that.
Mo, I have a question.
Thank you.
But
Ibrahim, I've got a couple of people with their hands up, so I'm gonna call on Brian and then Justin and then you.
Hi there. I want to give you a little bit of experience I had as a member of what we termed ourselves the Bill of Rights Defense Committee. And we were formed in opposition of the Patriot Act and gave a lot of talks to a lot of government bodies, including Eugene. Eugene was the 14th jurisdiction to pass a resolution against the Patriot Act. And as we moved forward, we realized there was such a thing as joint terrorism task forces. And in making agreements with certain cities and counties, including Lane County, Portland, etc., what we formulated was an agreement that said the officers who are in the Joint Terrorism Task Force with the feds shall follow Oregon's Article 1, Section 9 guarantees and restrictions. At all times they are working with the feds, because Oregon guarantees your Fourth Amendment rights, what we call Fourth Amendment rights here, search and seizure and privacy rights, much stricter than the federal government does. And so perhaps something in there could say that the EPD will abide by Article 1, Section 9, and that would easily cover the Fourth Amendment because the restrictions are much safer. They guard the citizens much greater than the Fourth Amendment does. So any adherence to Article 1, Section 9 would by nature be an adherence to the Fourth Amendment. And then there would be none of this federal surveillance and the kind that maybe we're afraid of, and we ought to be anyway. That's just my recommendation.
Okay, I want to bring folks back to what Councilor Ye shared with us about how we don't have to have this ready to implement. We really just need to get the idea across. And so I think we're getting really in the weeds here. I'm gonna call on Justin and then Ibrahim.
Yeah. The reason I raised my hand again, I think that the goal of the committee was to speak their mind in regards to the policies. As far as the language is concerned, like using espionage, if we're so concerned about offending someone and instead of speaking our mind in regard to what needs to be addressed and be changed, like the goal is not to be concerned so much about people taking offense to the things that need to be said. And so, like, I raised my hand because Marty, I want to support Marty, and if that's the wording they feel that needed to be used to get that across, and it sounds like it was referring to the equipment, not to the individuals who were using it. I don't see a purpose in changing the wording. If the goal of this committee is to save people's feelings, then we're going to be handcuffed and not be able to say effectively the things that need to be said because we're too concerned of offending somebody. And so I just want to speak my mind, Marty. I support what you guys. As far as the language goes, I don't really see a huge need to change that. If that's the language, even if it is strong language, they felt needed to be used in referencing that policy.
Yes, these are recommendations. We are not lawyers.
Very true. Hi, Patricia. I'm glad you're here. Ibrahim is up.
I think I'm gonna just pass because I think the problem with this entire committee is that people have their feelings tied to whatever everybody else is saying into feeling that they're being targeted or singled out, and that's very sad, and it's very sad because we're not looking at single out anybody here, and I want to say that because most of the people on this committee, I personally did not know them before joining this committee. And I'm expressing frustration that I have here from my community members for years. I was the chair of NAACP Legal Readers Committee. Brian is the new Legal Readers Committee chair. We have received plenty of complaints about people feeling that they want to express something, but they feel like they cannot express that. And being here, expressing that and feeling that people feel offended or somehow feeling that they hold the power to decide who's joining or whatever. It's not that. We just want to make things move forward. And I want to say that it's unfortunate, but that's how it felt. It felt because people cannot express themselves, and some people chose not to express themselves. But at the end of the day, we want to make sure that what we are saying, if there's any other reason than feeling offended or being offended or whatever it is, I personally don't care about people feeling when I'm expressing something, because what I'm expressing is not from me. It's from people who come to me and say, well, I need your help. I need your support. So I want people to understand that. I'm not expressing my own feeling. I don't have feeling about
Ibrahim, 30 seconds, please.
Yes, 30 seconds. I'll get there. I don't have personal feeling about all of this. But I want people to respect us when we are expressing feeling from people who come to us. Brian is talking because Brian he is the chair of NAACP Legal Redress, but he has been fighting for civil rights more than 40 years in this town. One of the only lawyers in this town doing that for free sometimes. That's
Time's up, Ibrahim. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Eve?
Well, I want to thank Marvin for his faith to the oath and for his service, and I can feel his hurt feelings or being upset. But I also want to ditto what Justin said. This is not about a personal issue. It's rather that folks that been invited to the table that don't usually have a place at the table, having their say. And we don't have to agree on everything, but we do have to be civil and respectful of each other. And I think that's where friendly amendments can take place, and we don't have to wordsmith everything, as Councillor Yates said, but we do need to be able to speak our piece, even if we're wrong. We should not be held accountable to rather explain and input, and if it's useful, that's awesome. If it's not, it's ink on paper. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to pause for a second and ask folks who haven't spoken up if there's anything you'd like to add to this discussion before we move on. I'm trying to look at faces and also at hand raises on the participants list. Okay. It looks like we have an issue with the sharing screen. So Marty, I might just ask you to move to the next one and just summarize it for us. Does that work?
Just to update you on that, Mo, I can share the document that was shared, but my PowerPoint has been freezing. So the Word document that was sent out with the packet, I can share easily, which contains Marty's revisions. Marty's, would that be useful?
Yes, I believe we only have one more.
Okay. One moment. And then if you can let me know which it is, because I don't have that in front of me.
Should be the last one on there.
It'd be the motion regarding chemical weapons.
Chemical weapons, yes. Thank you, Kevin. Okay, so I'd like to incorporate the motion from Daniel. In our conversation about this, there was a discussion about the fact that chemical weapons are banned internationally for war, but they have been approved for police use. So I would like to entertain entering them both as two different options, as Councilor Ye said that we could. One being the one from Daniel saying ban any chemical weapons that are banned for international warfare. And then in the discussion in the subcommittee, I said, well, if we do that, I wouldn't want police to then have to resort to more lethal force options when they're dealing with these situations. And so we would like to create a blanket policy regarding the use of all chemical weapons. The policy should require verbal warning. It should state that chemical weapons should never be used to wake or rouse a person. And the policy should require having medical personnel on site when the use of chemical weapons are anticipated. And then there's some language there that I've borrowed from other police policies. And this would also affect what happens for riot control. And the verbal warning would have to give reasonable time for compliance before using the chemical weapon. And the reason why it was proposed as a blanket policy for all chemical weapons is that I was becoming confused by how many different options there are and different ways to deploy different things. There's OC spray, there's other kinds of spray, there's different size canisters. You can have it in beads, and rather than chase all that down, to just put it in one category. So now I am entertaining questions and comments.
I don't see any hands on.
I'm not seeing any.
Oh,
now we got Lindsay.
Marty, I appreciate all the work that you've done on this. I can see that it's taken a lot of time. I think what is a little challenging for me is that some of these things I think already do exist in our policy. And so I'm trying to figure out, like, we can make recommendations for things that are already in our policy, but that seems odd. And at the same time, the work that would be required to carefully go through, see what we already have, and then make recommendations to modify them, I think is way beyond the purview of this commission. It's certainly beyond my personal expertise, even as someone who's relatively familiar with policies, right? And so I'm trying to figure out how to thread the needle to encapsulate what the concern is so that we can then say, and then this is the right place to put that concern. So what I'm hearing is the concern is, I'm going to say what I think I hear, and I could be totally wrong. So please correct me if I'm wrong. What I think I hear is we want to minimize or eliminate the use of chemical weapons in crowd control situations. That's what I feel like I'm hearing when I'm reading this, or that if they have to be used, they're used with these considerations like warning, like medical assistance, like paths of escape, and these types of things. We have looked at those relatively recently at Police Commission, and I do believe some of those things already exist. And so I'm trying, like I said, I'm trying to figure out, like, if we lift our eyes just a little bit from the specificity, can we say the committee as a whole agrees that we should minimize or eliminate the use of chemical weapons? Could we say we would like a more clear report on the justification for these things, or that we would like City Council to know and understand how and why these things are used? And you see what I'm saying? Like, I'm just struggling because it's work that needs to be done so carefully, and each word I think actually does matter. And yet I don't think we're in a position to do it well in this format. So I'm just like trying to figure out what to do with that.
Patricia has her hand up.
Thank you very much. I requested since the very first day, the very first meeting in October, that we got the materials to do this job. And here we are, you know, so many months later, without even, you know, vacations between Thanksgiving and New Year's, that we were getting a lot of information and not exactly what we needed to do this job. I am very disappointed that only Marty Wilder got the information for his subcommittee from the authorities directly to do the job correctly. Because this is the job that we are here to do, to analyze policies, to point out words that need to be changed so we can address the situations that have been happening. This is the only way we're gonna be doing a difference. This committee is a bullshit otherwise. If we don't do anything extra than all the agencies that spends millions of dollars every year. We have the Human Rights Office, we have the Police Commission, we have, and all, if we analyze all their work that it has been done in the last 5 years at least, you know, they have done this exercise that we are doing here now. So the request, I did it privately of each of you, of the leadership. I did it copying everybody. I did it so many times, asking you the work. They told me that you guys were volunteers. And I hear on the very first meeting that you have a consultant agency doing the work. And we wanted to have the policies pointed out so we could read them.
Patricia, 30 seconds, please.
The wording. So if we don't have another choice of just saying what is already there, it's not because we didn't want, I mean, it's not our fault. We should just recommend to build up a strong policy that will really cover this point. That is very important. Thank you.
Thank you. Marvin, did you have were you raising your hand or just?
Yes. I like this part of the resolution that states that the officers and the department give proper warning before they use the different types of chemicals that can be used in a riot situation. That's very important, that people understand that if their intent is simple for peaceful protests, for which I have been involved in, they have time to separate themselves from those individuals who infiltrate and are there for the sole purpose of creating violence. That's a very good situation, and is something that should be used by our department. I can't speak to others, but it is something that should be used every time before the next step taken, because it's important to not have to ratchet up the next amount of force in order to provide public safety. So that's very good.
Thank you. Any other comments? Rick?
I would ask only, what is the motion that we would be voting on if we were to be voting on this motion at this time?
Marty, if you can
I mean,
clarify, but I believe it would be that plus the original motion. Is that correct?
The original motion is provided as a suggestion or an example.
Okay. So it would be the element that I've highlighted?
Correct.
Okay.
okay, I see Leah's hand up.
Can you read that element you highlighted?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We would like to create a blanket policy regarding the use of chemical weapons. The police should require verbal warning. It should state that chemical weapons should never be used to wake or rouse a person. The policy should require having medical personnel on site when the use of chemical weapons is anticipated. And then we offer the example policy wording from other departments.
So I have Leah and then Silver.
I just wanted to say, I really appreciate the revised motions. I appreciate the work that's gone into this. And I think having the way it's worded, I think if there is something in there that is already being addressed or already being looked at, I don't think, it feels like that shouldn't be a problem. That we're providing some direction so that if there is movement on that already in the department, then it could just move forward in accordance with these recommendations. And to remember that it is, right, what we're doing is making recommendations that hopefully will both encourage new work, but also support any work that's already being done. That's all.
Thanks, Leah. We got Silver and then Jason.
So I want to speak to this idea that we keep hearing that the police commission is already taking care of this, or we're already having the conversations. And I want to say that it's extremely intimidating to be a person of color who sits on the EPD Police Commission and having to raise my voice to speak in opposition to some of these different processes that were being put forward. And I've expected that this committee come out with some stronger recommendations that we, BIPOC people who are sitting at the table, can't always articulate because of fear and intimidation. And it's an extreme privilege to think that we should have these conversations at a continued time in the future under those different committees or councils. I have worked personally with a number of people on this committee, and I've been grateful to have been able to serve with so many different people here. And I feel that this is a safe space for me, and I am not intimidated. So any conversation that we're having that says, well, we're already taking care of this, please be done. This is my safe space. And I want to be able to articulate what I have seen and have experienced from my own BIPOC perspective in this community, and to speak to the people that I've had interactions with as a person who's been deemed a leader in this community. So please be done with that conversation. This is our time.
Thank you, Silver. I have Jason and then Ibrahim.
So I don't know if, our particular department, EPD, has any policy language about this, but one of the things that I was noticing during particularly, the last summer's uprising was the targeting of the press as well as non-protesters with the chemical weapons. And I'm wondering if there can't be some sort of recommendation where where possible to avoid targeting or using it against folks, like providing first aid or something like that.
Thank you. Kaz actually has something to say, and then it'll be Ibrahim's turn.
Yep, so very briefly, and going back to the presentation that I gave at the start, I think for those members who are having a bit of trouble in terms of the fact that we don't have the time and space to be really creating policy, but it looks like we are doing so, the best way to conceive of what we're doing here might be that it's a qualitative data gathering exercise. We are learning what a group of people who have traditionally been excluded would like to be able to do, like to be able to achieve in terms of changing police policy in such a way that they feel safer and that they feel heard. Now, in terms of what will happen with this, as I showed with the process diagram, this will go to council. Council will then go through all of the sort of experts, policy experts, the police commission, etc. But what it does is it gives weight to certain processes, like the, if the committee were to pass the motion on chemical weapons, that would give extra weight to the work that's already being done. If there are any other things that haven't been considered, then we would be seeing those things put on the agenda. So I think that's probably the easiest way to conceive of it. We're never going to be able to get to the level of clarity and finesse in a 30-person Zoom room that we need. But if we see this as a data gathering exercise to see, we've gone out to people of color and other marginalized groups, we've done the little seminars and the presentations to give a deeper understanding of why the things that they experience are actually happening, what lies behind those, and then asked for suggestions on how those things might be changed, that we should be able to get to a place where what we have in front of us is an indication of intent and something that shows where relative priorities, where relative levels of interest or concern are in that community. And if we conceive of it like that, I think we might be able to move forward with a slightly smoother sort of system or pace than we're currently managing to do.
Thanks, Kaz. Ibrahim?
Well, Mo, I'm gonna pass because I think we have a lot to do.
Okay. All right.
Just if that would have been what Kaz is saying, it was expressed to us at the initial onset of this ad hoc committee, then I think we wouldn't have been able to fill as many seats as we did. I think a lot of us came to this table thinking that we're going to actually come out with some hard policies, some ideas that felt as though they could actually make a change in this fucking community. And we don't have that anymore. We're losing that. With all the actions that took place over the last summer, with all the work that was done, with all the people in the streets, now Biden's elected, now we have to just make it a suggestion. That's bullshit.
Yes, thank you, Silver.
I see Marty has his hand up.
So I wanted to say a few things in response to the feedback that I heard. One, to Jason, we didn't cover everything in our subcommittee. There are 4 more proposals that haven't been considered yet. And one of them was from Erica Linkango, and it's on crowd control. And it gets into some of that stuff in more detail that you were referring to. And also, I just wanted to say that when I'm looking at this, what I did is I kept the lens of the 21st century policing and the Campaign Zero. I looked at other examples of what other cities have done, and then I cross-referenced that side by side to all of the EPD policy that I could find that was related to it. And I was, crossing things off like boggle. If it was in both places, cross it off. These were the things that rose and bubbled up that I didn't see covered on the existing EPD policy. And I may be wrong about that, but the other thing that was in my mind that I feel is important to say here is that anything that I wanted, that I was bringing forward, was brought forward either from a voice that somebody had brought to me saying, we need to do something about this, or thinking about what's happening elsewhere in the country that we don't want to see happening here in Eugene. So nothing is meant as an accusation. Nothing is meant as a way to blame or ridicule or undermine. It's meant to keep our space the way we want it to be, a safe space for our communities. Who knows who might the next police chief be? Who knows what might happen? We want to get our policy in place now to say, this is what we want it to look like. This is what we don't want it to look like. Thank you.
So I don't see any more comments. I guess I'd like to ask you all, are there items in this bunch of motions that are giving you pause? Because you're being asked to consider, I guess, 10 motions. Brian?
I can't say enough good things about the work that Marty has done. But on the duty to intercede, I would like to make a friendly amendment to include the de-escalation policy. That if that policy is violated, another officer notices that, there's a duty to intercede and report that as well.
How does that land with you, Marty?
I thought I had put that in the revision. What was that one under? That was under duty to intercede.
Yes.
Let's see where we're at.
I thought you did too, but it didn't come up on what we saw today. So one way or another, I think a violation of the de-escalation policy, which your intent to, and be included in the duty to intercede. So I'll either make a friendly amendment or however you want to go, Marty.
Okay, so I found where it is on the revision. It is in the part where it says, here are the policies borrowed from other police departments. It says any officer who observes another officer about to use force that is illegal, excessive, or otherwise inconsistent with this policy and or with policy 820 de-escalation shall, absent extraordinary circumstances, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where it was, but it was not in the, what do we want to call it, plain speak language of the revised motion.
So if we vote on that duty to intercede motion, we'll be voting on the de-escalation policy included.
Correct. The way it's presented as a revision, it is included, yes.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I missed it.
I'm sorry, Marty, if you could just clarify that particular statement. When it comes to the voting, would you like, is it effectively the revision is an addition on top of what is in the original motion? So people would be expected to vote on both the original motion plus the kind of explanatory paragraph that you've added?
I kind of see it the other way around, Kaz, that they would be voting on the revision, and the original is part of it. But it's taken a lesser focus because now it's just, here's a suggestion to the city council. So the part that would really be what we're voting on is the above paragraph, revised motion.
But it'll all be in the report. I'm going to take just a minute because I don't see any questions to just ask, especially the folks who have not chimed in yet. If you have something to add, this would be a really wonderful time to do that. I don't see any hands. Okay. So I'll ask just one more time, are there motions in this list of 10 that are giving folks pause, or do you feel like you're ready to vote on this collection of motions?
I make a motion that we vote on it as a package.
Second.
Any discussion?
Who seconded that? I missed it.
I did.
Severio?
Silver. Yeah. All right. I don't see any hands, so we're gonna do a vote. I'm gonna start at the bottom this time. Marty?
Yes, but I also want to give people an option to include a dissenting clause. We said that, Councilor Ye said that we could have that. So people who want to, they can add a dissenting clause.
Can you explain what that means for the folks who maybe don't know what that means?
Speak to their no's or speak to their abstentions. Is that what you mean, Marty?
So explain it, if you like.
If they have an issue, then they will say, this is why I have an issue. This is the reason I take issue with this.
Right, and then that'll be included in the report. Patricia? If you're talking, you're muted and we can't hear you.
Sorry about that. I couldn't find it. Yes, okay. I vote yes.
Thank you. David?
Yes.
Rick?
I vote no because while there are a number of things that I'm very supportive of, there are a couple of items that I would like to be able to vote on individually because I can't support them. And for that reason, it's going to force me into voting a no on the whole package.
Okay. Do you want to say more about that or email Kaz or Kevin or I, or?
Yeah, if we could have your objection, either if you're willing to share it today or in writing, and you would also have the option of voting yes, but with the caveat of, but I don't like this and I don't like this. And we would ensure that when that motion was presented in the report, that you're either with your name next to it if you wished, or without it, your objection was noted.
Well, you know, there are 11 or 12 items here in the package, and I don't have them in front of me right now, so it's hard for me to tell exactly which ones I have problems with. but there's so much content that we're voting on for each one that it's difficult to tell exactly what it is that I would have a problem with at this point. For example, I would go along with what Marvin said about the espionage issue. If that's still in there, it's hard for me to tell whether that, because we never voted on that. And so that's where I stand on it. I will email what my feelings are about it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Quentin? Quentin, if you're talking, you're muted. Okay, we'll come back. Marvin?
No.
Guadalupe? Sorry, actually, Marvin, do you want to say more about that
No.
for the report?
No.
Okay. Okay. Guadalupe?
Yes.
Silver?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes, but I want to say to Rick's point, I believe Marvin and Marty came up with a language of surveillance upon which they agreed and took out the espionage language. And if that's not yet put into the actual, then I would ask Marty if that was his intention to put it in there. I think he said yes. And maybe we can get some kind of clarification on that language. But otherwise, I vote yes.
I know. Yeah, no, I want to see your titties.
Quentin, you're back.
Yes.
Do you, yes? Okay,
I'm sorry.
it's all good. Was that a yes vote?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Marty, do you want to clarify if you took the word espionage out?
I leave it to be a dissenting clause.
Okay. Justin?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
Erica? Erica, if you're talking, you're muted.
Yes.
Thank you. Ebe Hamide?
Yes.
Lindsay?
Yes.
Leah?
Yes.
Ibrahim Koulibaly?
Yes.
Macy?
Yes.
Thank you. And Daniel?
Yes.
Mo, that's 16 yes and 2 no's. So that motion carries.
All right. Thanks, friends. How did we do this? We got to next step. 30 minutes to go. It's Daniel. Thank you for giving us all that time. I see there's a hand up and it belongs to Daniel.
Yeah, so there was another motion which I don't believe was included in Marty's, which was one that I had rewritten around 911 dispatch calls. And
here we go. You are correct. The one that was sent out with Marty's revisions today?
The one that I sent out separately from Marty's revisions, yes.
do you want to, so there are 3.
Yes, one of them was just a comment. The other one was the addition to the use of chemical weapons, which we already voted on, which Marty had mentioned about no chemical agents which are banned for war may be used for riot control. But I don't believe that that got included in the final version of that. But I'm also happy to write that just separately as a quasi-dissenting opinion on that. But I would like to bring up the motion on 911 dispatch calls.
Okay. Hey, Kaz, can you share that on the screen?
Just pulling it up now.
And Daniel. Okay.
That's the first of your
Daniel,
motions, right, Daniel?
Let's see. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. This one?
Do you want to walk us through it?
Yeah. So basic idea is that do you want me to read it?
Yes.
Okay. So there are 2 parts of this. First, all 911 calls for which the caller requests cahoots or another unarmed response team shall be dispatched through a separate console other than EPD, which shall dispatch the appropriate unarmed response team. EPD will not respond to such calls unless there is a clear indication of a weapon that may harm someone other than the person with the weapon. These agencies can in turn call in EPD as needed, making the police second responders. Officers responding to the scene should first defer to the alternate agency. Part B, a task force shall be created to develop protocols to handle cases of mediation such as disputes, neighborhood noise disturbances, the houseless, etc. The task force would develop a set of policies and protocols for dispatch authority and interagency engagement. And this was a lot of language that I had reworked from the original motion, which also included items regarding the regarding EPD and Cahoot's budget. But since that's outside of the purview of this committee, I removed those and reworked it. Basic rationale is there have been a number of incidents that I've become aware of where police have responded to mental health crisis and other nonviolent calls, which ended up escalating into police violence against unarmed people. And so by separating out calls to those unarmed response teams into a separate console from 911 dispatch, that that EPD would not be able to respond to such calls unless they are specifically called by those unarmed first response teams. And I will entertain a second.
Eve?
I have a little issue that I could sure use some help on it, which is, it's in the line that says, unless there's a clear indication of a weapon that may harm someone other than the person with the weapon. I don't know how a gun or a knife, let's say, can be distinguished from, who it could hurt. That gives me some trouble, that line right there. And if Daniel could help me out with it before the roll call is upon us, that would be helpful.
My thinking around that was related to another of the use of force ones, and I don't recall which one. Maybe Marty, you could help me. Where where if someone is only potentially a harm to themselves, that would be handled differently, and so that's why I included that wording. But I'm not necessarily wedded to that particular language. I could also see cases where there are 911 calls, which are obviously for a mental health crisis, or others where they don't specifically request cahoots. And so the language of this could certainly be modified. Really, the important thing is that when there are calls which other unarmed response agencies are better equipped to handle, that EPD will not insert themselves into those cases unless they're specifically asked to by those first responders.
Yeah, I have no issue with the idea behind it. I just have an issue with the ambiguity of that line specifically.
Do you have a suggestion for amending it, Eve?
Yeah, I think deleting it would be a really good way of amending it. You know,
I mean, I think the spirit of it is that
I would
EPD
second
should not
that.
be responding to such calls, and leave it at that, and following the direction of Councilor Ye, that the details can be worked out subsequently.
At that point, you can just eliminate the entire sentence.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, I'm good with that too.
Okay. So I see Brian, and then Patricia, and then Ibrahim.
My original comment was, I think forgotten because I'm so old, trying to recall it. I think this should also be tabled. There's going to be two important civilians testifying on the 17th that address the issue of cahoots, and they're calling cahoots. And I think cahoots should be contacted, which Marty did, and I'm in the process of doing again. Before we talk about them, they should be given an opportunity to talk for themselves and what they want and how they best see it. So I think if we table it to the meeting after February 17th, we should have all the information that we could possibly have to address the cahoots issue.
Okay. Patricia?
I was just gonna support the changing of that sentence. Thank you.
Okay.
It's already covered. Thank you.
Cool. Ibrahim?
Hi. I just want to say something. You know,
You're muted.
Ibrahim, you're muted.
Sorry.
thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So you're seeing people talking or speaking of their experience about dealing the police in two cases, Brian Babs and Mr. Rodriguez. And some people speak about what happened at the at the school and because I don't want to side with anybody on these issues. But what I want to say is, it is very important, very, very important for us here in this committee and for the police, Eugene Police Department, and to know that when we're talking, when we're speaking about misconduct, because I think that since we have been here tonight, we're not talking about police. And it's very important that we keep focused on those things. It is because of either our own experience or experience of people who come to us because of what they're experiencing in the community.
30 seconds, Ibrahim.
Oh, wow, that goes fast. So tonight, what I want to put the focus on is we have multiple layers of the way that the community can interact with the police, or they can interact with the organization that represent them. Because I want that to be the main focus of this committee. We're going sideways and we have to remain focused. So.
Time's up, Ibrahim.
Thank you, Kevin.
Sorry to do that to you.
Thank you. Marvin and then Marty.
Thank you. I wonder if much consideration was given to granting 911 operators more authority not to dispatch police to non-criminal situations which are social in nature. When, as a police officer, you're dispatched to someone who is having a mental condition and it is not criminal, that often escalates the situation. It would be great if you guys thought about allowing dispatch to determine whether or not to send the police to a social issue, whether it was homeless or mental health or drug or alcohol abuse. That is not a law enforcement issue, that is a social issue. And by simply sending someone in a uniform, that person then fixates on a new target. Was that talked about in your findings here?
Is that question to Daniel?
I think
Yes.
maybe I can see 4 of you at a time. So this is
Question to the
Excuse me.
Yeah, I was not on that subcommittee. I just took a motion that had come out of that subcommittee and reworked it. But I do like the focus on the wording of non-criminal social calls. That's a nice, that's a better, broader term for it.
And it gives 911 operators discretion that they do not now have. You don't need to have people use the police to handle family and social problems and mental health problems that they are ill-equipped ever to deal with. And those situations often escalate. And then I've seen where it had been mental health providers, it's been family, it's been neighbors. It is not, those people have not committed crimes and should not be subject to law enforcement. And dispatch needs to have that kind of authority to make that decision and find other resources in the community to handle those situations.
all right.
So I
I'm gonna
couldn't
start
vote for
calling on
this
people.
without that being there to go to city council.
Okay. Thank you, Marvin. I'm gonna start calling on folks based on how many times you've spoken tonight, because I have been keeping track. Because 6 of you have your hands up right now. So I'm gonna start with Leah.
Oh, I really appreciate what Marvin just expressed, because I think there's two problems. One, people call and ask for cahoots, but also we have people calling in from the community asking for police when it's not appropriate. So I think that really addresses, does a better job of addressing that particular concern. I'm wondering if there's a way to add it to this particular recommendation, or if it's something we could address later. But I do think it really fits that critical thing from what I hear is both that when people want cahoots, they get police, but also people call in and ask for police when, if there was some, if the dispatcher had the ability to say, this isn't a criminal activity, that, you know, to determine that, it could really make a difference.
Awesome.
So
thank you.
I guess the question is a little bit to Daniel, or I'm not sure where we go with that. Could it be added? Would we have to address it later?
I'm gonna ask someone else to answer that question. Daniel, how would you feel about it being added?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I mean, I totally agree with what Marvin has said and what Leah has said. I think it sounds like there's general agreement on the concept of this. It's just coming down with the wording of this that in a way that we could vote on. If you give me a couple minutes, let other people talk, I might be able to do that.
Okay. I'm gonna call on Marty.
So I wanted to share some of the background on the issue that we did discuss in the use of force subcommittee, and specifically that Chief Skinner was on board with it and was on board with acknowledging that police should not be handling mental health calls. Mental health professionals should be handling those. And yes, I agree that 911 needs to be authorized, but they need a place to dispatch to. And I don't think it's fair to put that on cahoots. I think the city needs to, that's why I was proposing the separate console, that the city needs to really invest in this. There are a lot of organizations in our town that can respond to these non-criminal social calls, but there's not a central location for them to coordinate around. And what I've been hearing, and I feel like it would be negligent of this committee not to say something about the many voices in our town right now that are saying we need a different responder. We need an alternate response that is unarmed, that's not police, and we need the city to invest in this. So how we word it and how we say that, I would suggest that Daniel use this night the way that we used the last meeting to gather information and allow people to email in your feedback so that he can then craft all of this into a motion that we can consider the next time that we gather.
Okay. Ibrahim.
Thank you, Mo. I think my question is, what do we have that Kahoot can perform that EPD cannot perform? What is that mystery and that kind of special thing that Kahoot can do, but for some reason EPD, Eugene Police Department, cannot do? What skills those people from Kahoot have that Eugene Police Department doesn't have and cannot even learn? we are talking about cahoots and EPD as religion. You know, we're gonna bring something somehow from the Holy Grail on whatever it is, cahoot up there that Eugene Police Department cannot acquire and deliver. So, you know, it is all on Kahoot. We kind of like, you know, fantasizing about Kahoot. You know, Kahoot can do this, Kahoot can do that. We don't think about why EPD cannot do it, why EPD cannot perform the same thing, why EPD cannot deliver the same thing. So to me, it's like we're putting more burden on Kahoot without thinking about why EPD is not able to perform the same thing. We're not asking for more. We're not asking for EPD to perform something that's kind of like out of the universe. We all agree that Kahoot is doing the same job. Why EPD is not doing it? So for me, it's not about thinking about, oh, well, you know, what's Kahoot here? Kahoot. The question is why EPD cannot do the same thing that Kahoot is performing in the streets of the gene. So I think at this point, I'm gonna ask everybody to think about that.
Ibrahim, 30 seconds, please.
What's the problem? Why not EPD cannot perform what Kahoot is doing? And what would it take for EPD to be able to perform what Kahoot is doing? And then we can move forward. And 30 seconds, thank you, Kevin. And I'm gonna stop here. But I think it is frustrating that we seem to be defending that EPD seem not to have the ability and capability to perform what Kahoot is trying to do. That's frustrating.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna, before I call on Brian as our last person, I wonder if folks who have not spoken up have anything to add in these last few minutes. It's easier for me if you raise your hand on the participant list. Like I said, I can only see 4 faces at a time. But I'm gonna scroll through anyways because I want to give you a shot. Okay, Brian.
Hi there. Consistent with what I just put in the chat, I think other sounds are being heard. Am I the only one? You know, on February 17th, you will be hearing from 2 people. One woman who called for her son, another woman who called for her nephew who was visiting, both of which were called cahoots for the son and nephew who were going through a mental health issue. And in each time, instead of cahoots, the police arrived. And in each time, a different variant of violence, one very serious and one relatively not so serious, occurred on the person with mental health issues, and arrests occurred as well. This is something that if it happened to these 2 people, and I happen to know them, I don't think it's unreasonable to assume that it happens way more often than we know. And so to prevent that from happening again is to take EPD out of the link in that chain of events. Because, you know, one way to look at it is cahoots is there to help. EPD is there to arrest. And those 2 do not necessarily go together. There are times when an arrest is needed. There are times when counseling is needed. Those 2 don't transfer very well. When an arrest is needed, cahoots ain't gonna do the job. When counseling is needed, EPD ain't gonna do the job. And we need to find a way that the two are separated completely so that people in need of mental health get cahoots, people in need of an arrest get the EPD. And I want to talk to cahoots about this, but I think their own line, their own way of being called or somehow contacted is the ultimate way from this point of view for the EPD not to get involved when counseling is what is needed. So I would, like Marty said, partly, let's
Brian,
do it.
30 seconds, please.
Sure. What Marty said was, let's hear this at the next meeting. My suggestion is let's hear it at the next meeting after February 17th, when folks can hear from the civilians.
All right, and then I just want to remind folks that there's a hiring and training subcommittee tomorrow where maybe some more clarity about this could come out. So Daniel, does this feel like something that you know, rewording and bringing to either the next meeting or the one after is the best course of action?
Yes, I mean, now with 2.5 minutes left, absolutely. I can rework that, and I will submit it through email in advance of the next meeting.
All right, thank you.
And just before we go, another little quick reminder, I'll be sending out more doodle polls. I'm going to ask you to fill them in as quickly as possible because we don't have much time in terms of getting subcommittees scheduled. And also, if anyone else knows someone who wants to give testimony, we've had 4 people identified so far, but we are still taking people if there's interest. Marty?
Just to follow up, what should we do with the leftover issues that weren't addressed in our subcommittee? Should we just bring them forth as individuals?
I think we'll have that discussion outside of here, because if we are able to get those other subcommittee meetings scheduled, then we can look at having some form of third subcommittee meeting for use of force. So it's kind of situation dependent. Otherwise, I can work with you to pull together a little packet that we can present at a future meeting.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. Our next meeting is on the 17th. So we'll see you in 2 weeks. And as far as I know, there are no next steps to announce. So that being said, the meeting is adjourned.
So Marty's motions were passed.
And happy Groundhog Day, everyone.
Okay, happy Groundhog Day.
We don't need to repeat this over and over again, thankfully.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.